Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day as we head into our final division in the NFL for our season previews. Finally means that football is right around the corner. So we're going to be closing out with the NFC West and an Arizona Cardinals team that I am very intrigued in for this upcoming season because everyone has sort of discarded him and has discarded quarterback Kyler Murray. But this is a Cardinals team that I could kind of see myself talking them into being competitive for a playoff spot this year. Now, question, is this a make or break season for Kyler Murray? The issue with this, because I think there were a lot of people, at least on this show, in the comments section, talking about this idea of the Cardinals shouldn't take Marvin Harrison Jr., that they should instead look to draft a quarterback instead. The problem with that is being that Kyler Murray is still on a very lucrative contract that is going to be fully guaranteed through the, I've got to double check here super quick, but he is still going to be fully guaranteed for another few seasons, and they're going to be on the books for it. So I think it becomes a very tough situation for Arizona to justify just moving on for basically nothing in Kyler Murray to be able to take a new option. He signed that deal a few years ago. It kicked in last season, and it is only going to continue to get more expensive as things go on here. So ultimately, I have a pretty hard time imagining that the Cardinals decide to move off of Kyler in these next couple seasons. Now, we'll see about that, but I think that Kyler has a little bit longer of a leash than people are really anticipating. And that being said, I also think that Kyler is, I've never been a huge Kyler defender over the course of watching him, but I also now think that people have chosen to write him off entirely, and he can be an all-right option for the Cardinals, at least for these next couple years while they're trying to sort of run out the remainder of his contract. And there's a lot of question marks on this roster as well. One thing we know for sure about Kyler Murray is that when he is fully healthy, the dual threat ability from him can 100% scare opposing defenses, where he ran for 819 yards the last time that he played 16 games in a year, which for a quarterback, that's far more than you can ever even really expect to ask for unless you have a Lamar Jackson, essentially. And, Justin Fields may be in that category as well. But, Kyler has been to a couple Pro Bowls, for whatever it's worth. We're talking about the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2019, and it was a ton of money for the Cardinals to give up in the first place when they signed him to this new deal, but it's still possible, I think, to see a bounce-back season, and so does Shots Below the Belt in the comments section, that he says Kyler Murray goes off in a bounce-back year for Arizona. Definitely on the table, I think. Now, can he stay fully healthy? It's definitely a question mark at this point. We talked about Bryce Young just a little bit ago on this episode, and I think that Kyler Murray, the size conversation does have some sort of a factor. Can his body take the hits of the NFL? Does he have the offensive line in front of him to protect him? I'm a little bit dubious on that. When you look at just the overall offense that they have, not a ton of known commodities on that offensive line. They did make some adjustments during this offseason, what they hope can help improve the offensive line for them. They released DJ Humphries to hope to upgrade the tackle position. Paris Johnson Jr., their first-round pick from 2023, he is now taking over the blindside protector position. They seem to have been encouraged from what he was able to produce in his rookie season, so he's on the left now. They signed Jonah Williams, another former first-round pick from the Cincinnati Bengals in 2019. They signed him to a 2-year deal, and they're putting him on the right. So seems like you should get some pretty reliable tackle play. The issue is the interior is a weakness, and it probably makes them one of the worst offensive line groups in the NFL. But maybe some upside, especially on the outside there, and that does, tend to be the big thing for them. And it's interesting, last year you look, they were actually top 4 in rush yards per game, and that was even with James Conner dealing with some injuries along the way. So you think that maybe they could continue to build off of that with Kyler Murray. Not that I think they're going to try and be running him out all too often necessarily. I think that it at least adds an element, a wrinkle that opposing teams have to be able to take into consideration. They draft Trey Benson as well out of Florida State in the 3rd round for somebody who could also continue to, produce at the next level. So that's not a bad running back room between James Conner and Trey Benson. The receivers are fine. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a big impact, but he seems like somebody who the transition shouldn't be all too much of a strain for him. Basically, as soon as he stopped playing football at Ohio State, he said, I don't care about the combine or anything like that. I'm training for the NFL, because he knew that he was going to be locked into being essentially, worst case scenario, a top 5 pick in the draft. And he ends up going to Arizona, number 4. And Marvin Harrison, I think, can be the best wide receiver that Kyler Murray's ever played with. Now, I know he played with DeAndre Hopkins. It wasn't in Hopkins' prime. Still had some good years. But based off of what I think Marvin Harrison Jr. can be, I think that they can have a connection like Kyler has had with nobody else since stepping foot into the Arizona Cardinals situation. Michael Wilson had a pretty promising rookie season for them as well. Trey McBride was a breakout at tight end for them. So the weapons aren't bad around Kyler. Do worry a little bit about that offensive line, but you just worry about how that's going to impact Kyler's health, because if Kyler's not playing, this quickly goes downhill. Desmond Ridder is now their backup quarterback, in case you were curious where he ended up. So, I think that that's going to obviously be a very crucial part of their season. Defensively, like I just talked about in the last segment, I think that Zach Gannon is very capable of surprising people. Something that really stood out to me last season was, if you looked at the Cardinals, and we talk all the time in the NFL about offenses and this idea of pre-snap motion. You look at the Cardinals, they kind of have their own spin on that in a lot of these plays, where you have players just sort of roaming around pre-snap, not letting opposing offenses get a crystal clear look at what defense they could possibly be lined up in. Feel like I saw Zach Gannon take this to a level I never have before. I think it could honestly be, at least, bits and pieces, a little bit of the future of the NFL. It's only very limited where you can go from there, but something I'm definitely keeping an eye on there. And the key for that is going to be, adding actual players on that defensive side of the ball, which frankly Cardinals didn't really have last year. And they spent big in this offseason to try and at least just get some more NFL ready players for them. Some free agent signings: Mac Wilson, linebacker from the New England Patriots; Bilal Nichols, defensive tackle from the Raiders; Sean Murphy-Bunting, cornerback who played last season at Tennessee. I believe he was, I'm going to double check here, I think he was on that Super Bowl winning team with Tampa Bay in 2022, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, he was. So in that year started 13 games. So a pretty solid starter for them there as well. And then they take Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously. But by the way, massive draft class for the Cardinals this year. Took 12 selections. Probably not all of them make it. But Cardinals were just sort of firing off shots at guys, and they take Darius Robinson, who, like we just talked about in the previous segment, he is expected to miss a few weeks, but could be a big piece off of the edge for them. He was in contention for that starting spot prior to the injury, and then they followed up that selection by taking cornerback Max Melton in the second round, and he is probably going to start for them this year as well. So I think that this is a Cardinals team that, again, you look at it, 31st in scoring, second most points per game allowed. That is a brutal number. So the Cardinals have a lot of digging to do to get themselves out of this, roster hole. But, I mean, they have guys that are going to be ready to play this year. And I think that it is going to lead to a big-time improvement from the Cardinals this season. And, as we sort of dive into their schedule as well, I want to highlight the comment from Shots Below the Belt as well, talking about, during Kyler's beginning years with Cliff Kingsbury on offense, he was very predictable, as he put. And I think that we saw that, again, I don't want to criticize necessarily too heavily on Cliff Kingsbury's preseason play calls because no teams are trying to give away their hand there, but I feel like to some degree, you saw maybe a little bit in the first couple of games with Washington that it's going to be at least a fresh start for this Cardinals team, for Kyler Murray, getting a fully healthy season, knock on wood, hopefully, and being able to run this back with a number of different options. Now, looking at their upcoming season, it is middle of the pack in terms of strength of schedule. And you can see why. Not too many games that are, guaranteed wins. But again, I think that they're going to be way more competitive than people anticipate, especially in those interdivisional games where the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers, those have all been the teams that have been the headliners in the NFC West through these past few seasons. And the Cardinals have a chance to sneak up on them a little bit. They've been a pushover when Kyler hasn't been fully healthy, but I think that they can win way more games than anticipated. I think that the Rams and the Seahawks in particular, also both teams that can be competing for playoff spots this year, but I think that they can win these games. And ultimately, you look at some of the outer divisional opponents. I mean, they have the Commanders, they have the Patriots, they have a Chargers team that the Chargers could definitely be good this year, but still a younger team. And, we'll have to see how things sort of progress with this Justin Herbert foot injury. If it ends up extending at that point, week 7, you think that Justin Herbert would probably be healthy. But either way, I believe the Cardinals have that game at home. So I think there's a lot of winnable games, especially when you look at who they have at home, that I think that they can capitalize. So ultimately, with the Cardinals, I have them at 8-9. Their over-under line that I saw was 6.5 wins. I think that they can exceed expectations. 8-9, you are in it to the end of the season, and I think that we could see, as Shots Below the Belt says, they got to split those division series. 1-1, you will kind of take that for some teams that, all three of them have been the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Rams. All been to the playoffs in the past 2 seasons. So, the 49ers, of course, the NFC Championship game in back-to-back years as well. So that's definitely going to be, that's the measuring stick there, actually. Going back here, you look at their games against San Francisco. Week 5 is in San Fran. That's going to obviously be a very tough one. And then they get the 49ers again, week 18 at home. That might be the one for making the playoffs or not. So definitely having those divisional matchups circled for this upcoming season with the Cardinals. But again, I have them 8-8. They're probably just out of range. I think they're going to punch above their weight class all year, though. They were kind of even a tough out last year with Josh Dobbs through the first half of the season. That being said, I think they only won 1 game with Dobbs. So you put in Kyler Murray, this is a different conversation. Again, with all the starters that are coming on defense as well, I think this is going to be a much better Cardinals team than people are anticipating, and they could be better than what I have. This can be a playoff team if Zach Gannon's the guy, if Kyler Murray is fully healthy this upcoming year. But, those are a couple pretty big ifs as well. But Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. I think that this is going to be a fascinating division to keep your eyes on for this upcoming season, because just the list of different outcomes that are conceivable is pretty long. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Love the active chat that we got today as well. So always appreciate hearing your guys' thoughts on the latest happenings in sports. But that is all the time we have for today. So remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back tomorrow, same time as always, at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.